Hi, it's Rob from the Bush and Boltgun. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to paint an Iron Hands Primaris Intercessor. If you'd like to support the channel, our Ko-fi and Patreon page are linked below. Now on to the video. So the first colour that we're going to use is Citadel Iron Hands Steel. I'm going to use this as the base coat for doing the hands and also the aquilla on the chest. If you don't have this, I think Lead Belcher is a pretty similar colour. It doesn't really make too much difference. But any kind of that kind of darkish grey metallic should work fine. Once the hands and the aquilla are done, move on to the next colour. Next up we're going to use Vallejo Modeler Chrome. I'm going to use this to do the main metallic parts of the bolt rifle, the handle of the pistol, which is in the holster on his back, and also the studs on that studded pauldron. Also do the sections on the power pack too with this colour. So with those done, we're now going to use a little bit of Citadel Mephiston Red. I'm going to use this to do both eyes. So a very quick layer this one. Just a little spot on each side there for each lens. Now we are going to use a little bit of Citadel Khorne Red. We're going to be using this to do the wax parts of the purity seals. You've got one on the leg there and one on the studded pauldron. Failed to show the paint, and also started painting the purity seal before starting the video. Next up we're going to use a tiny little bit of Citadel Retributor armour. We're going to use this to do the winged skull on the front, or the side rather, of the bolt rifle. Now we're going to use some Baneblade Brown. This is going to be used to do the pouches and the holster, and also the belt, which goes around his waist to the buckle at the front. Once you've finished with that, we're then going to move on to Citadel Rakarth Flesh. We are going to use this to do the parchment sections of the purity seals. It's another quick layer, this one. Next we're going to use some Citadel Contrast Snakebite Leather, and use this to go over the Baneblade Brown and give that nice leathery colour. If you don't have Snakebite Leather or Baneblade Brown, you could just use Mournfang Brown and Citadel Nuln Oil for a similar effect. Doesn't look quite as deep brown, but you can do pouches and stuff like the pouches video I'll link up here and get them looking pretty cool. Now I'm going to use a tiny spot of Citadel Druchii Violet just to do each of the eye lenses. Next up it's going to be Citadel Carroberg Crimson, and we are going to use that to do the two purity seals. Like so. Now it's going to be a little bit of Citadel Seraphim Sepia. We are going to use this on the two sections of parchment on those purity seals too. So they'll now be completely shaded. For some reason, skipping through the video, I can't seem to spot the section doing Citadel Nuln Oil on all the silver metallics. So do that now. Do all the silver metallics with Citadel Nuln Oil. Next, Citadel Agrax Earthshade. We're going to use that to do the section of Retributor armour on the bolt rifle, like so. Now we're going to use some Vallejo Black to reapply the black to any of the areas where we may have gone over that, so working on the body of the rifle and also the sections of armour and the power pack and the seals between the armour plates as well. Just go around, check all those, make sure there is no silver or red or gold or brown or anything like that on those areas, and just get them so they are completely black once more. Maybe there isn't too many spaces where you've gone over it on this. If so, that's fine. Just may need to touch that up. Now I'm going to use some Vallejo German Grey. I'm going to use this to highlight the armour. So if you imagine a light coming down from above, and you'll be highlighting those areas that you can see from above with the German Grey. It's a very, very dark grey, so it is cool for highlighting black. Once you've finished the German Grey, we're now going to move on to Citadel Mechanicus Standard Grey. We're going to use this to do mainly edge highlights. So going along all those edges that will be catching the light to make sure they stand out. This will help break up those black armour plates. Now we're going to use the Citadel base colour, Iron Hands Steel. I'm going to reapply that colour to the aquilla and also to the hands and the wrists on each arm. You want to think about the light coming from the top and where it's going to reflect and where you want to keep that shade. So the underside of the iron colour is going to be shaded while the top edges are all going to be coloured. Next we're going to use Citadel Ironbreaker to do the highlights on the Iron Hands Steel. So you want to be covering about maybe a third to half of the Iron Hands Steel with the Ironbreaker to build up that layer and give that a nicer shine. Next we have Citadel Stormhost Silver. We're going to do the final layer on the Iron Hands Steel, so we're just going to do some edge highlighting and a little bit where the light will be catching it on the larger surface areas. Also going to be using this on the aquilla as well to give that the final shine, make that look nice. When we finish with that, we're going to use some Citadel Khorne Red and we're going to work on those purity seals. So when you're working on these, you want to make sure that you're leaving the shade in the recesses, highlighting mainly the top edges and any areas that be catching the light, whilst leaving the shades on the underside and towards the armour. Any of the little ridges and on the inside of the sort of circular bit. With that done, we're now going to move on to Citadel Wazdakka Red. We're just going to highlight about 50% of the Khorne Red that we've just applied. Again, mainly on the top edges and the top sides of things. And finally, we're going to use a tiny little bit of Citadel Pink Horror. We're just going to do some tiny touch-ups and highlights on the seals. Next up, Citadel Rakarth Flesh. I'm going to start reapplying the colour back to the parchment on the purity seals. So I'm going to be leaving the Seraphim Sepia in the recesses, highlighting all the top surfaces and the crests and ridges and edges of each of those parchment pieces. Slightly off camera here, sorry, so we'll link up the Purity Seals video just so you can see exactly what I'm doing if you want to. Now we're going to add a little bit of Vallejo White to the Rakarth flesh. We're just going to do the first highlights on the parchment. So as always, probably about 50% of the Rakarth flesh you want to be highlighting here. Even the sepia in the recesses and the Rakarth flesh around those recesses before you highlight it. This will just start to build up those layers of colour to make it look like light is catching the parchment. Now we're going to add a little bit more white to it. We're just going to do a final highlight on the very edges and the crests of those creases. That'll just make those stand out quite nicely. Give it that parchmenty paper look. Like so. Now I'm going to use some Citadel Balor brown. We're going to start working on the belt and the holster and pouches. So you want to be leaving the snakebite leather visible in the recess, the kind of concave of that belt, and also in the areas that wouldn't be catching much light on the holster and the pouch. You want to be thinking about where the holster and pouches are going to be scuffed a lot, where they've been rubbed against things or from use, so the little flap's going to have plenty of scuffs on there, and the edges and corners where it's been caught on walls or just handled a lot. With that colour done, we're now going to add some Rakarth flesh to the Balor brown. I'm going to start to highlight the edges of the holster. Now I actually add an extra layer of highlights here, and the only reason being is that this layer of highlights wasn't quite as light as I wanted it to be. So if you add a little bit more Rakarth flesh than I've done here, then you won't need to do quite so many highlights. So again, we've added a little bit more Rakarth flesh to the previous mix. I'm going to start highlighting this. Adding a little bit more so it looks scuffed, so we're doing horizontal brush strokes on the vertical edges and vertical brush strokes on the horizontal edges. That will just give you that rough and ready scuffed look to the leather. Slightly off camera here, but I will link in that leather video. And finally we're going to use a tiny little bit of pure Rakarth flesh just to do the final little highlights to those areas. Like so. Now it's a little Citadel Retributor armour, and we're going to start working on the golden winged skull. I'm using a small layer brush here from Citadel. We're just picking out those details and the bolt rounds in the magazine too, just to make those stand out. Now I'm going to use some Citadel Liberator gold. We're just going to highlight the skull and the wings and those bolt rounds as well. I think we're going to use a tiny little spot of Vallejo Model Air Chrome on its own, just to do a little silver spot on the stud for each of those pouches. Then we're going to mix a little bit with Citadel Liberator Gold and just do the final highlights on the skull and the wing. Now we're going to start working on the shoulder pad. We're going to use Vallejo White Now this is how to paint the Clan Company Avani icon, which is a large cog with a black circle and a white skull in the centre of that. There's a video for that, came out on Sunday, so I'll link that here. But here you can see I am just drawing a circle on. This is one of the methods you can use to freehand the circle on, draw a cross and then kind of join it up with a quarter segment on each bit. The symbol has a black hexagon in the middle, so we're going to use some Vallejo Black to do the hexagon. So I find the easiest way is to do a vertical between the top and bottom point, then do 2 straight lines, one on either side to represent the sides of the hexagon, join those all together, and then work out which bits are too long or too short and just go back and forth from white to black to alter them and tweak them and get them right. As I say, there is a start to finish tutorial which has been linked up here, and I'll teach you how to do it start to finish. So with that done, the next thing that we were working on is the little cutaways to make the outer circle into a cog. You can either mark them off like so and fill them in, or you can just do a little square if you want to freehand a little square in. So you've got 3 on each quarter. Just spread those out. Then all you do is use a little bit of white and black to tweak those to get them all the same size. So now I'm going to use some Vallejo White just to paint that skull in the centre. That will be finished for now. So I linked up the video for this Clan Company logo. I'll be doing a few different Clan Company logos as time goes by, so if there is any that you're interested in seeing, just sing out below. Now I'm going to use some Vallejo White to do the numeral and the tactical designation on that knee there. And he's going to be a battle line troop, so he's going to have the up pointing arrow. Like so. I'll link up how to do the battle line marking here. Also, if you'd like a video on how to do the numbers, like how to freehand the numbers, just sing out below. I can do one of those. Now I'm going to start working on the eye lenses, so we're going to use Citadel Mephiston Red. And I'm going to take the back lower section of each lens, probably about the back lower 2/3 of each lens, and paint them with the Mephiston Red just to bring out the colour, leaving the front and the front upper section still shaded. We're then going to use a little bit of white mixed in with the Mephiston Red to lighten that to a kind of dark pink, and then we're going to do about half of that area that we've just painted with Mephiston Red. We're going to do about half of that with this new lightened colour. Yeah, again, going to add a little bit of white to the previous mix and do about half again of the previous colour and the previous highlight. And finally, we're going to use a bit of Vallejo White and do a spot at the front of each lens and a tiny thin line to highlight that final mix of pink. And that is the miniature finished. And this is the finished Iron Hands Primaris Intercessor. Really pleased with how he turned out. The only thing missing is the Iron Hands Chapter badge because of that studded pauldron. But we'll be working on the Iron Hands Chapter badge on Sunday's tutorial. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to some of our other social media linked below. Thanks very much. If you like the channel and you enjoy the content and you'd like to support us, our Ko-fi and Patreon pages are linked below. Thanks very much.